Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. Let's get started with a call to order, and we'll move forward to our roll call.
Mrs. Hogan.
Present.
Mrs. Denon.
Here.
Mr. Brophy.
Here.
Ms. Nyman.
Here.
Mrs. McWhirter.
Here.
Mr. Updegrove.
Here.
Mr. Hemingway.
Here.
Mrs. Deeroff.
Present.
Mr. Foose.
I think he may be trying to get on later.
Okay. 8 members are present.
Okay, thank you. Let's go with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence, please.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, again, everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Leads us to our public comment. I'm not sure if we have any public comment.
We do not have any public comment, correct, Mrs. Kincaid?
That's correct.
Okay, well then let's get right on with it. I'm gonna shift this over to Ms. Torsia and let her do her thing.
All right, well, thank you. Welcome, everyone. And my apologies in advance of the long list of policies that I have to present to you this evening. Many of them are a direct result of the changes to policy 103 and 104, which is the discrimination, Title IX, sexual harassment. 103 is affecting students and 104 is affecting staff. And what I have done this evening is we have prepared a brief summary of each of the policies that I'm going to be presenting for the request to move forward to first reading. So that's what I'm asking all the board members for this evening, is that once we go through them, that if we can get a thumbs up or a thumbs down with regard to moving the policies forward. And I will ask after each of the policies, if that's okay with all of you. So just to briefly review, I did give you a lot of homework for your long holiday weekend. You did get it a whole day early in advance. So I appreciate all of you taking your time to review. And I did also include the summaries for you as well, so that you didn't have to go through everything. But a lot of what I am presenting this evening is really just a play of words, going from whatever they're recommending through Title IX, as well as many of the other policies that I'm bringing forward are a direct result of COVID-19. So to make sure that we are carrying current policy as that is while we're operating in school with COVID-19. So the first 2 policies that I'm going to review are 103 and 104. And the updates to federal regulations on Title IX, sexual harassment, non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. So on May 19th, 2020, the U.S. Department of Education, Office for Civil Rights, published an amended federal regulations implementing Title IX. The federal statute addressing discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs and activities. The regulations become effective on August 14th, 2020. The 14th date obviously has passed, and although policy is important, the most critical element of compliance to focus on is to designate staff and acquire the appropriate training to get the Title IX process right. I do want to let the board know that All of the administration that needed to receive Title IX training have done so. And we have identified a Title IX coordinator, which will be our human resources officer. And even though our new human resources officer is not here, she has also obtained the training, knowing that she would be acquiring this role upon her getting here to Boyertown. Let's see. The revised regulations include new provisions applicable to both elementary and secondary schools and post-secondary institutions for addressing Title IX sexual harassment, including a specific definition for what constitutes sexual harassment and how schools must respond to both reports and formal complaints of sexual harassment that occur in education program and activities. And the reason why it's also addressing post-secondary institutions is because we do have some students who attend Montgomery County Community College, as well as Reading Area Community College. As part of the overview of the major components, I am going to, just kind of read down through what will be appearing in these policies. You will see new and expanded definitions for Title IX sexual harassment, formal complaint, actual knowledge, supportive measures, and other key terms. The requirement to appoint a Title IX coordinator with specific responsibilities and other key roles for implementing Title IX sexual harassment procedures. There will need to be investigators, decision makers, individuals to handle appeals, and individuals to facilitate an informal resolution process. Specific training requirements for individuals serving in each of the designated roles. And again, all of our Boyertown Area School District staff have attended the training to date. Procedures for receiving and promptly responding to reports, including response when the school entity has actual knowledge of conduct that meets the definition and parameters of sexual harassment in an education program or activity against a person in the United States. There's a grievance process to address formal complaints of sexual harassment, including expanded requirements for investigation, notice and participation of all parties, issuing a written determination regarding responsibility, and an appeal process. Designating supportive measures and a list of potential disciplinary sanctions. There will also be a specific notification, documentation, and record-keeping requirements. School entity policies must designate who is serving as a Title IX coordinator, which I did share with you. We're not going to mention names so that the policy will remain consistent. It's more about the position that the person is in. The policy also must define sexual harassment based on the new definition in the Title IX regulations and provide direction on how reports of discrimination or sexual harassment may be made and how they will be addressed. In revising these policies, 103 for students and 104 for employees to reflect the new requirements of the Title IX regulations, it was determined that the most helpful way to address both the Title IX requirements and continue complying with other discriminative harassment laws and regulations such as Title VI, Title VII, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and others, was to establish an umbrella policy. So policy 103 and 104, respectively, are the umbrella policies that addresses all types of discrimination and harassment, including Title IX sexual harassment. And then there are separate attachments that provide the specific procedures and processes for addressing discrimination, harassment, retaliation versus Title IX sexual harassment. So that's it, as an overarching explanation of what these two policies will be doing. There are quite a few attachments that go along with it. They do not need to be presented to the board for adoption. It's just the policies that need to be presented. Fox Rothschild's office have gone over this with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that the language has been consistent throughout both policies, and making sure that any changes that were made in one were carried over to the other. They feel as though these policies are ready for the first reading. So with regards to policy 103 and 104, any questions? And are we okay if we move this to first reading? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. Mrs. Deeroff, are you fine with us moving this forward as well? Okay. You're allowed to talk now, Mrs. Deeroff. All right, well, I'm going to,
I would say yes.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that's 103 and 104. Moving right along, we're going to move right on to policy 203, which is immunizations and communicable diseases. Obviously, this is here because of COVID-19. So the Pennsylvania Department of Health issued a temporary regulatory suspension of requirement for children's immunizations on July 21st, 2020. The department stated that the temporary suspension was to enable children to enter and attend school without the required immunizations, since many students have experienced delays in scheduling preventative medical appointments, including those at which vaccinations are administered. So that's one of the biggest reasons for this policy. Policy 203 was updated to generally refer to guidance from state and local health officials, in addition to language on compliance with law and regulations. Since much of the current public health situation is not addressed in law or regulations at this time. References to the board-approved health and safety plan were also added to the policy language to encourage consistency and implementation of policy in accordance with approved plans. In the section on immunization requirements, language was added to allow for attendance of a student who has not been immunized in compliance with state regulations when such attendance is in accordance with programs or guidance established by the Pennsylvania Department of Health. The language included broader than what is specifically addressed in the current temporary regulatory suspension, so that the policy language can stand the test of time in case additional temporary suspensions or special immunization programs are established by the Department of Health at a later time. New language is also added regarding communicable diseases, stating that students may be excluded from school based on regulations from the Pennsylvania Department of Health or guidance from state or local health officials for specified diseases and infectious conditions. Based on recommendations from school nurses, additional language was added to the policy specifically addressing notification to parent guardians of the potential need to exclude students for communicable disease during the school year. Requests for updated emergency contact information, the requirement for parents and guardians or another emergency contact to come to school to transport the student if exclusion is necessary, and the parameters surrounding return to school. Language on health records was also updated for consistency with revisions made to policy 209 last year based on changes to the school code. So that is the summary of policy 203. Any questions where we stand there? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask again for permission to move this to first reading. Seeing no questions, Mrs. Deeroff, do you have any questions?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking.
Certainly. Mr. Foos, I know you're there too.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Moving right along. Policy 209, health examinations and screenings. Policy 209 was updated to refer to the board-approved health and safety plan and incorporates language regarding monitoring of student health, in addition to the more specific requirements for health examinations and screenings required under school code and state regulations. A new section on health monitoring was added and includes language addressing requests for alternative methods of monitoring based on religious accommodations, as well as addressing student health conditions such as autoimmune disorder that may render some types of health monitoring, such as temperature screenings. So those are the changes to policy 209, health examinations and screenings. Any questions? Mrs. Deeroff, any questions?
I'm fine.
All right, I'm going to keep moving right along. If you have any questions, you please speak out, okay?
Thank you very much.
Yep. So the next summary that I'm going to review goes over policy 247, hazing, policy 249, bullying, cyberbullying, and policy 252, dating violence. They're really connected, so that's why they lumped them together as part of the summary. So the changes are when a report of hazing, bullying, or dating violence can be interpreted at the onset or during the course of an investigation to fall within provisions of Title IX, sexual harassment, or other discrimination, it triggers the need to proceed with a joint concurrent investigation into all allegations, coordinated with the full participation of the compliance officer and Title IX coordinator. Policies 247 hazing and 249 bullying, cyberbullying contain a section addressing the joint investigative requirements, which has been updated to reflect consistent terminology for Title IX, sexual harassment, and Title IX coordinator. So those two policies just have this consistent language as it is referenced in the policy 103, 104, the Title IX policies. Policy 252, dating violence, has been updated to add the section relating to the joint investigative requirements for reports that can be interpreted at the onset or during the course of an investigation to fall within the provisions of Title IX, sexual harassment, and other discrimination. And I just note that policy 103 includes the federal Title IX definition for sexual harassment, which contains in part a definition for dating violence that is different than the state definition for dating violence as defined in 252. So again, these policies are having that same consistent language that is being used in policy 103 and 104. So these three policies will also be moving for that first reading. All right, moving right along. Could be the fastest meeting ever. Policy 314, physical examination. References to the board-approved health and safety plan were added to this policy, as well as a definition and language regarding monitoring for staff. Specific language on communicable diseases and exclusion from school facilities based on state regulations or guidance from state or local health officials was also added to this policy. Those are the changes to policy 314. Okay. Policy 317.1, educator misconduct. This has been updated to add a section to address circumstances when allegations underlying a report of educator misconduct include conduct that appears to constitute Title IX sexual harassment and other discrimination. So this is recommended for legal liability purposes. And did I mention that Fox Rothschild reviewed all of these policies? Okay. Policy 334, sick leave. Language addressing medical documentation was revised for consistency with policy 314, which broadens the terminology beyond just a physician to also include a licensed physician, certified registered nurse practitioner, or a licensed physician assistant. The separate section on documenting sufficient proof was removed and merged into the authority statement for greater consistency within the policy. That is that part on sick leave. All right, moving on to policy 340, responsibility for student welfare. This was revised to remove brackets indicating that certain language is optional for specific provisions that PSBA recommends be included in the policy to address school entity legal liability and provide specific direction to staff regarding responsibility for student welfare. Minor revisions were made to more broadly address staff responsibilities and actions in order to account for both virtual and in-person learning environments. So language was also revised to address responsibilities for all staff beyond just teachers who have responsibility for student welfare. References are to policy 705 and 805 addressing safety and emergency preparedness and response were also added to this policy. So because we've had to move to remote learning, virtual learning, and because there are other adults who are also supporting students beyond just teachers, this policy wanted to make sure that we incorporated that it was a virtual environment as well could be reportable. And that it doesn't just fall on a teacher, that it could be some other employee who may be working with those students. Again, this policy is also recommended for legal liability purposes. Okay, moving on to the next policy. Policy 705, Facilities and Workplace Safety. Revisions to Policy 705 are focused on referencing the provisions of board-approved health and safety plans and integrating those with the school entity's overall safety rules and strategies. Policy 705 now contains language that specifically addresses face coverings as well as other protective devices, which have always been addressed in this board policy, and states that violation of the policy and school safety rules may result in disciplinary action or denial of entry to school buildings in accordance with the parameters of the policy and state and local health and safety orders. Accommodations will be made for individuals with disabilities and medical conditions in accordance with applicable law and board policies. And other board policies have been revised to refer back to Policy 705 for these specific health and safety provisions. And Policy 705 is recommended for legal liability purposes. That one's pretty straightforward. Okay, moving right along. Policy 824, Maintaining Professional Adult-Student Boundaries. The section relating to reports of inappropriate or suspicious conduct has been updated to include the reporting method of using the discrimination, sexual harassment, bullying, hazing, dating violence, retaliation report form. The policy also was updated to include the responsibilities of the Title IX coordinator in assessing and addressing reports of discrimination on Title IX sexual harassment. Additional minor updates were made to reflect the guidance document issued in June, addressing implementation of Policy 824 in a digital learning environment. Again, this is a recommended policy, and those were the changes that were taking place as it pertained to the Title IX policies. Moving on to Policy 904. Public attendance at school events. So Policy 904 and the accompanying attachment, and the attachment is the public behavior at school events. That's the title of the attachment. They were updated to address the authority of the board and its designated staff to limit attendance at school events when necessary to protect the health and safety of students, staff, and the public. Language was also added to direct staff that attendees must be notified of the school entity's health and safety rules, which must be followed prior to entry and while attendees are in school buildings or on school property. The accompanying attachment specifically addresses staff actions to provide warnings and requests for attendees to leave school property for failure to follow designated rules and guidelines. And Policy 904 is recommended for legal liability purposes. Part of the attachment, which is the public behavior at school events, goes on to list the expected behavior as well as crowd control procedures. And we are on the last policy, Policy 907, school visitors. Again, similar to the revisions made in Policy 904, this policy on school visitors was revised to address limiting visitors to designated areas or limiting the number of visitors when necessary to protect the health and safety of students, staff, and the community. Additional language was added directing visitors to provide information and identification if required to protect the health and safety of students, staff, and the public in school buildings. Optional language was added under the school visitor process to address notification and compliance with school health and safety rules, as well as limiting building entrances for school visitors. And that completes the policies that I am presenting to you this evening to be placed on next week's board agenda for first reading. Just thumbs up for everyone. Great, wonderful. And now I'm going to hand the meeting back over to you, Mr. Hemingway.
Okay, thank you very much for those summaries and an explanation of each. That brings us on to any committee comments.
Just one quick clarification. For the Title IX policies, was the overarching reason that we had to change it because the new Title IX federal reg said that we need to have a coordinator? Was that the main? That was the main change to Title IX, that everybody had to have a like a designated coordinator to kind of investigate. Okay.
And a process in which to review any type cases. So there is, along with all of the new policy, there are also, and I know that Sandy would come in and yell at me. There are a bunch of discrimination, sexual harassment, bullying, hazing, violence, retaliation report forms. So there's a lot of different forms that are also going along with this policy, which is making sure that they are all consistent and that we're asking the same questions over and over again.
Gotcha. Ms. Hyman, you had a question?
Yeah, do we need to maybe go away from first reading right to the second reading, that we need them in place for
I
anything?
don't think that we can bypass. And because we do already have policy in place, and because we have also reported that we are moving forward with these policies, we're okay for right now.
Okay, I just want to make sure you didn't need them for anything that was
No,
upcoming.
we'll be okay.
Mr. Updegrove?
Yeah, I was question on policy 209 on immunization. Did I understand that correctly? That's the kids have to have all this stuff to the school?
What they're allowing, Mr. Updegrove, is they are allowing for students to have a longer time period in order to be able to get them, because many of them did not receive the scheduled immunizations potentially in the spring when all this broke out. So it's giving the schools a little bit more discretion than right at the start of the school year to have them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, anybody on the floor have a question? I'm not unable to see Mr. Foose or Ms. Hogan if you guys have a question or a comment.
I'm good. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't have anything either. Thank you.
Okay, and then Ms. Deeroff, I can't see your screen, but do you have any comments or questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking.
Okay, with that being said, looking to see any other further announcements or upcoming meeting dates.
Next Tuesday, we do have a committee of the whole meeting at 7 o'clock, at which time we will be doing a presentation for returning our students back to school, as well as any motions that need to be made, or not motions, I apologize, anything that we need voted on, you know, personnel, etc. Anything else that might be coming along, but nothing.
Hey, anybody? All right, well, I thank you all for coming out tonight. And do I need a motion to adjourn, or do we just adjourn? Can I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. McWhirter and Ms. Nyman seconds. I guess we're adjourned. Everybody have a great night and safe driving home.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.